On+Giants. Mounds, Monsters, Myth and Man, or Why We Want to Be Small, by Brad Lockwood.
Copyright 2010, Brad Lockwood, all rights reserved.
Fabulists named Cheney and the Freemasons.
Googling Cheney will offer rants and raves on George W. Bush's vice president and quotes from an early antiquarian. It was and will be left to others to create the long-term legacy of T. Apoleon and Dick Cheney. However, in tracking the antiquarian, I found too many parallels between the two. Far more than a shared surname, most notable is their penchant for expounding the unfounded for selfish, at times dangerous and disastrous gain. Neoconservatives, war hawks, and enthusiasts of giants and early civilizations all praise their respective Cheneys, while academics, scholars, soldiers, strategists, war crime investigators, conspiracy theorists, journalists, Iraqis, and archaeologists still struggle to make sense of their fantastic claims. Whether declaring that Americans would be greeted by Iraqis as liberators, or that the creators of forts and mounds in Cattaraugus County were an immense and advanced race, the gross statements of Dick and T. Apoleon Cheney seem to fall apart after further inspection. This is yet another area where intelligence and information, and proponents of the two, fail and or mislead to the point of misrepresenting.
Footnote.
Aluminum tubes, mobile biological weapons labs, CIA agent Valerie Plame, Lewis Scooter Libby.
I had other priorities in the 60s than military service. A quote made April 5th, 1989, on his 5 draft deferments. We know he's been absolutely devoted to trying to acquire nuclear weapons, and we believe he has, in fact, reconstituted nuclear weapons. March 16th, 2003. On the question of whether or not Iraq was involved in 9/11, there was never any evidence to prove that. June 2009.
Domestic spying, refusing to adhere to President George W. Bush's own executive order on archiving documents. Halliburton, attacking homosexuals when his own daughter, Mary Cheney, is a lesbian who gave birth to a child in 2007 with her domestic partner et al.
Regarding the antiquarian, though, illustrations of the ancient monuments of Western New York is the closest I've come of instead of in on the internet to citations of T. Apoleon Cheney's most popular book. Not counting library and biographical databases, on web pages, mostly homemade, T. Apoleon Cheney is cited often and always inaccurately. Again, equally erroneous are citations whatsoever, because his 1859 book had no text. Still, the book sold remarkably well in America and Europe, perhaps aided by the fact that it had no text, no translations necessary. Even illiterate masses had access to Cheney's 24 somewhat scientific sketches. The first 12 illustrations are overhead views of interesting earthworks, forts and mounds, but the last 12 are what most sparked interest. Inferring a Greek and Aztec influence, Cheney's hand was obviously guided by other findings and writings from afar. A relief, then a vase, a bird engraved in white and nearly transparent stone, a life-size gray sandstone head sculpture, 7 1/4 inch facial by 6 inch breadth, weighing 24 pounds. Without the benefit of hindsight and the fact that none of the actual finds were ever displayed, only appearing on paper in Cheney's own hand, nor supported by text, only brief descriptions added in later editions, Cheney's sketches remain hypnotic. His 1859 illustrations of the ancient monuments in Western New York offered compelling proof of an advanced and artistic people. Atlantis along the Allegheny? Only enhancing the book's sales and apparent scientific merit is its title similarity to another prior, Ancient Monuments of the Mississippi Valley, published in 1848 by Ephraim George Squire, a newspaper editor by trade, and Dr. Edwin H. Davis, a physician. The team best known as Squire and Davis, who performed the most thorough early study of the subject matter, covering some 150 mounds and 100 earthworks, a prolific feat in hardly 2 years. Original theories on the architecture, builders, and connections were advanced. Ancient Monuments of the Mississippi Valley was the first scientific publication by the, quote, new Smithsonian Institution. Now, hardly a decade later, and aided on many fronts, early signs of Cheney's self-promotion skills evident, his own illustrated book's sudden success led to an immediate follow-up. Ancient Monuments in Western New York, comprising the results of explorations by T. Apoleon Cheney, civil engineer, etc., 1859. Not published until early 1860, and initially bound with other, quote, contributions to American archaeology, end quote, under the auspicious title, Contributions to the 13th Annual Report to the Regents of the University of the State Cabinet of Natural History of the State of New York. Cheney added text, including the first accounts of giant bones being unearthed, quote, precise, end quote, measurements, and reprinted the original 24 plates. Just to give a sense for Cheney's prose, a single page of 16 total of the newly added text contains the following.
I am led to the inference that these respective classes of works were reared by different groups of the aboriginal race, or even by separate races, an unknown nation of men, the last vestiges of fallen empire, already swept beneath the tides of the palaces of Ilium.
Given such poetic license and overuse thereof, there is little wonder why the response from the masses was so striking. Cheney's work was quickly made available alone in late 1860, reprinted and paged as it numbered in the compilation, pages 37 to 54, plus plates, and selling well, deserving of a second edition only months later in 1861. However confusing, 4 versions of Cheney's book being published in hardly 3 years, what this history of his publications underscores is this. If someone quotes Cheney before 1860, they can't. That's the extent of what the internet and enthusiasts of giants have to offer, though. Citations from Cheney's 1859 book, which had no text whatsoever. Maybe the title of his 1860 edition confuses. By T. Apoleon Cheney, civil engineer, etc., 1859. But that's no excuse, and what weeds out overeager amateurs. A reprint of Cheney's book in 1889 has only added to the confusion, perhaps explaining, but not excusing, how many later accounts of mound excavations from 1860 to 1880 also cite Cheney's work, alluding as if included, even though it was published much earlier with text in 1860. In addition to being an interesting study of the Internet's impact on information, a single inaccuracy propagating on multiple websites and spreading around the world, what Cheney's work and current accounts also offer is valuable insight into the minds of modern-day giant hunters. It is apparent that those cutting and pasting, reproducing and perpetuating misinformation fall into 2 categories, lazy or overzealous, showing a consistent preference for any proof versus accurate primary sources, akin to Vice President Cheney's case for invading Iraq being bolstered by the accounts of expatriates who hadn't lived in Hussein's Iraq for decades. These people undermine their own arguments. Other conspiracy theories hardly help.
We believe the Freemasons are involved.
Regarding a recent find, quote, smuggled, end quote, from coal mines in Kentucky, which the female webmaster described as a sculpture and proof of Atlanteans, i.e. Atlantis, in America, which, for some unknown reason, the Masons are trying to hide. I didn't know how to react to her declaration, knowing that membership in the Freemasons has fallen by nearly 80% over the past century.
Footnote.
According to an October 4th, 2006 article in the New York Times, membership in the Freemasons has fallen from a high of 300.